everybody. Welcome to the Along the Watchtower podcast. Coming to you a little late tonight. Tonight is Monday, January 11th. Had to think about it for a second, 2020. I was a little tired, so I had to take a nap. And that is just the real of it. But we are still here, live and in full effect. I am LM Walker, and today we have pretty much a lot of the same, more fallout from the Capitol Hill siege. The expected fallout, right? We definitely anticipated the Silicon left coming down hard, not only on, social media that Trump's involved in, but anything ideologically in opposition. Not even necessarily in opposition. Anything that is now questioning, because anything mentioning Stop the Steal or the election challenges, anything in that matter has been banned from Facebook. And I feel like, as far as I can tell, from Twitter as well, the channels that I subscribe to and look at don't really look at anything related to election fraud or erroneous election proceedings, anything of that nature. They don't really talk about it anymore because so much has taken place, not only as a result of that, but involved in that. Like, there were still ongoing legal proceedings leading up to the event. So, really, at this point, no one really should be speaking about it in that context. In fact, I was actually watching a video of Nancy Pelosi during the 2000 election, Gore v. Bush, and she was speaking about the conversation within the congressional chambers being not of disputing election results, but of reviewing election proceedings. And that's the whole thing I've been talking about. There were a lot of procedural errors that took place that definitely not only warranted investigation, but in some cases legally required investigation. Remember, there were third-party private entities like Dominion who were involved in the 2020 elections, and who, similar to Gore v. Bush, and similar to the 2004 election, where you saw electronic voting errors. Surprise, surprise, we had electronic voting errors. It's surprising to me how with every election involving electronic voting, there's been issues, and in every election that there's been electronic voting, there's been issues, and those issues have been, at the very least, the idea of investigating it has been proposed. Yet in this election, that idea, that concept is seditious and is troublesome. And it's like, well, no, it's not. It happens just like for the last 30 years, every time a Republican has won, the Democrats have challenged. Like, that's their legal and constitutional right. However, it is within this inflammatory context that has been superimposed on the conversation right now. This is all in the context of sedition and of treason, and it's inciting violence to speak. And it's like, no, it's not. You can these things are all separate issues. It's amazing to me. You have unmasked, macabre having, chaos making rioters, formerly protesters, who are going around literally pissing and pooping on stuff. Okay, you have people in there who are masked up, who have tactical gear and zip ties, and they're still looking for this dude. And that's in this case, this is where, tactically speaking, Antifa and BLM do it right, because they plan stuff. They actually plan stuff. You can make clear distinctions as to who planned shit during the siege, and who were just kind of like swept up in it. People who plan things, they're still out looking for those people. And even some who did plan things, they found them. Like, again, we mentioned on Friday, the guy with the Molotov cocktails. He's across the street in a truck, and a police officer comes up to him like, "Hey," and he's like, "Hey, officer, did they get the explosives in that vehicle over there?" He's like, the officer's like, "That's suspicious of you to ask. What's your name?" And the guy gives him his actual name, Lonnie, which of course is tied to the truck with the explosives in it. So not everybody here is Ethan Hunt, Mission Impossible. However, you conversely also have the gentleman with the semi-automatic rifle and the Molotov cocktails, 11 to be exact. So you definitely have And I'm sorry. There's even further than that. You have the people. We don't know if it was a gentleman or a lady. The group or individual who stole several laptops, one of which was Nancy Pelosi's. Right. So now you have an espionage element of this. In all seriousness, people need to start being able, especially going forward in the future. And it's like I can have all the hope that I want in the world, but really all I'm going to do is continue to cultivate myself and my skill and discernment, because as we go forward in the future, you will see this narrative. You will always see narratives being skewed and shaped, but I mean especially about something like this. This is one of the most one of the most politically charged uh, uh, events that I've ever been alive for, domestically speaking. Because I mean, 9/11 is a politically charged event, but that was international. You know what I mean? Occupy was a domestic political event, and although it was countrywide, it was not this. This was a constitutional, like a pivotal constitutional point that in which all of this happened. In all honesty, if this had been 100 years ago, this would probably this would probably be taken much more serious as far as how much of sedition, how seditious and treasonous this was. Can you imagine that 100 years ago, and during a moment of transition of power, one of the pinnacle constitutional moments, you had a not just like, it's not civil unrest, a violent unrest. You had an insurrection. Probably would have been a lot more dead people to start with. So, to begin with, Maryland's governor is still baffled by delay in approval for National Guard help. And we need to remember, and you know what? I've been so busy, I actually just now forgot that I was supposed to look into the SecDef to find out his political leanings and just to get an understanding, because as far as we read, the control for the National Guard obviously stops with the president ultimately. I mean, it goes through the Pentagon because they go through the Department of Defense. They go through the SecDef after Trump, and then obviously to Army commanders on the ground. And so ultimately, the determination for the mission and how they should be outfitted and etc. fell into the SecDef's hands. Now, I will always point out, if I were the president, if I were specifically Trump in this if I were the inflammatory person that he is, and I was a thinking, considerate person, I would beef up security just off of the general principle of everything being highly inflammatory right now, highly contentious. But he didn't really do that. Now, so there's some pundits who, and I haven't heard the entirety of his speech, but I've heard the clips that are like pointed out, and there again, you might have an argument for dog whistling, but there's nothing insidious about what he's saying. Okay, when people talk about representing political ideologies, they speak in languages that are not anthropomorphic. They speak in languages that are like axiomatic, and they are what's the word I'm looking for? Not amorphisms. No, analogies. Yeah, they use analogies for the physical, right? Because it's not physical. Ideas are intangible, but you still have to remain strong. You still have to stand, you know what I mean? Stand by your convictions and fight for them. When someone says you have to fight for your ideas, they don't mean you have to go to blows, although, yes and yes. But what they're talking about is having conviction, is being consistent, okay? But it's still spoken of in a physical sort of manner. So I hate all this crap where it's like, no, he knew what he was saying, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, you might have me with dog whistling and stochastic terrorism. I think I said that right. For a second, I thought it was a reference to stoicism, but it wasn't. And in fact, it's a legitimate claim, and it's generally what has happened to really anyone who has a differing sort of ideology. Now, so what ends up happening is you don't have consistency. But Maryland's governor is still baffled by delay in approval for National Guard help. All I know is that we were trying to get answers and weren't getting answers. Maryland Governor Larry Hogan said Sunday he still doesn't know why he couldn't get rapid approval to send his state's National Guard to the Capitol amidst Wednesday's insurrection. All I know is we were trying to get answers and we weren't getting answers. It could have been just the fog of what was going on. Hogan, a Republican, told Jake Tapper, State of the Union. They have to point out he's a Republican. I was getting called from the leaders of Congress pleading with me to get our guard into the city, Hogan said of the attack, which left 5 people dead and disrupted the certification of Joe Biden. Hogan said it took 3 hours to get approval to send Maryland's forces. Who was he calling? This is what I'm saying, okay? So who was he calling? Because ultimately, I feel like it would have fallen to the SecDef, especially after the riot started. They would have gotten the president somewhere, like into a bunker or something, more likely than not. So the question is, who was he calling? Because who he was calling is the person that was stalling. This is very easy. This is like where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? That's what it is. It's like, where in the world is the culpable person who let this really get out of hand? State governors control their own National Guard units, as well as accept or reject the use of out-of-state units within their borders. D.C., however, has no governor, so it must rely on approval from the Pentagon. Boom shakalaka. There we go. So, who at the Pentagon? Defense Department. SecDef? Okay, so then why aren't we asking questions of the SecDef? Our guard mobilized and was ready, but we couldn't cross into D.C. without the okay. It took some time. We had to run it up the flagpole. Our generals talking to Washington generals. We had been mobilizing. We had our police there. We had our guard mobilized, and we were just waiting. According to a timeline released by the Defense Department, the Capitol was ordered evacuated around 1. Hogan ordered a full mobilization of Maryland Guard forces at 3:47, and at 4:18, Acting Defense Secretary Chris Miller gave the go-ahead for out-of-state units to be prepared to deploy. Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy and Hogan spoke at 4:40, and the troops were expected to arrive the next day. A statement sent on behalf of the Army on Friday noted that the Maryland National Guard arrived in D.C. on Thursday 10 a.m. These are folks that are doing something else, Hogan told Tapper, and they have to pack their bags, get their uniforms, show at the armories. We were the very first ones to arrive in the city. Jonathan Hoffman, the Pentagon's top spokesperson, declined to comment on Hogan's accusations. Hogan, a frequent critic of Trump, excoriated him for his role. That's a new one for me. Excoriated him for his role in Wednesday's rioting. There's no question in my mind that he was responsible for inciting the mob. That was an insurrection. They stormed the Capitol, threatened to kill the vice president, and put the lives of people in danger, and he had a huge role to play in that. You'll never get me to concede. Like, it's a very easy thing to look into a camera and say, do not commit violence. Like, we understand how, trying to cater to your political base works. Okay. That's on Trump. That's always going to be on Trump forever and ever and ever. And it's like, he's not a politician. So he really didn't tiptoe. He didn't accomplish both goals as he should have. He didn't appease his militant white racist base that exists as strong as it is, and appease the more sensible Republicans or Trumpers, because really Trumpers are not Republicans. Trump's not really a Republican. He didn't do it very well. He didn't play that game very well. But Alex Jones, this poor man. I don't even know if he was there. This is actually the first that I'm hearing of it, but that's because Wall Street Journal's trash. What's interesting is that I'm not even sure if Alex Jones was there, but apparently the Wall Street Journal made a claim that he was there storming the U.S. Capitol. This is what I'm talking about. Now, this is a particularly special retraction because the CNN has had over 200 retractions, most of which has been most of which has been as a result of Project Veritas's work. Shout out Project Veritas. And the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, dozens of retractions. CNN's had the most by far, obviously. But this one's in particular to my heart. This poor man can't catch a break, even when he's not doing anything and he's not bothering anyone. They still are trying. But this is a part of trying to cast a wide net on whatever you want to call it, alternative information, alternative sources of information, alternative platforms. We'll talk about Parler being removed altogether. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. And what's happening is anyone, anywhere, big or small, no matter how, and I mean, they'll cancel you in a heartbeat. And that's one thing the left and the right will do, collectively, for any celebrity or any famous person who even probably will bring up even just the slightest hint of like election fraud or procedural misconduct, and they will be roasted. They will be crucified, crucified. And that's what I've been saying. This is now we will see. This is the catalyst for the third sort of wave of censorious actions that we will see taken from the Silicon left. So the Wall Street Journal apparently claimed that Alex Jones was among the Capitol siegers. The Epoch Times reads, the Wall Street Journal has retracted a claim that InfoWars founder Alex Jones was among those encouraging the storming of the U.S. I'm sorry, not even that he was there, but that he was those encouraging. So what, that he spoke? Really? The paper falsely stated that Jones urged rioters attacking the Capitol to move forward. Jones actually urged Trump supporters not to attack police and to move to the east side of the Capitol, the paper said. Video footage, so he was there. Video footage shows Jones on Wednesday using a megaphone to tell protesters to not have a confrontation with the police because they're going to make that the story. Exactly. This is about, and Martin Luther King understood this very well. This is one of the reasons, and Gandhi understood this very well, the optics of a movement, of an idea, how an idea presents itself, as well as how effective it is as an idea in its whole, are important things, right? Especially for politics. You have to gather the hearts and minds. When people see you representing something, that's one thing. You're chanting, you're shouting, you're holding up signs. When people see you representing something and you're setting shit on fire and you're running up on the Capitol with zip ties, you got Molotov, like, no, bro, you're not going to get anyone, not only are you not going to get anyone to be convinced of your claims or what you're saying or what you represent, but no one is even going to give you the time of day. You will be delegitimized, and this is what's happened. This is what we were talking about. From here on in, there will not be a claim to make, because the first thing people will say is just like, you're a seditionist, right? And that's the thing. And it's not even a matter of, and this is what I'm fearing, is that it will soon not become a matter of speaking in a nuance or trying to have like an in-depth conversation. I fear soon it will become a matter of agreeing or not, right? Because in disagreeing, you are suggesting an opposing point and an opposing standpoint. And I mean, carrying the narrative is the most important thing here. So to continue, Jones, asked them to march to the other side of the Capitol. InfoWars noted the retraction, describing Jones as having called for peaceful action and tried to lead the agitated crowd around the Capitol. I know, and it's like nobody's going to read the retraction, man. The statement is going, like, what is it? Why does that statement go? What does that go? It's like the truth gets, it's like a lie makes it halfway around the world before the truth puts its pants on. Yeah, and it's like no. It's hot news. Oh, Alex Jones, he's a nut job. He was blah, 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 blah. And then of course they'll bring up the gay frogs. Atrazine, actually, it's a real thing. And the guy, it's like some black biologist. Just on a side note, he's like a marine biologist who was contracted by a pharmaceutical company to find out the environmental byproduct of the runoff of some chemical that they were using to make drugs, and it was changing the DNA of the frogs, changing their sexual genitalia, and they were gay frogs having babies. I mean, that's the fact of the matter is, though, optically, because of who Alex Jones is and how he's portrayed himself over the years, over the decades, him screaming they're turning the freaking frogs gay does not only is that not great rhetoric, but it just doesn't help his credibility, his case that he's trying to present. People don't hear what he's saying. They see him acting like a nut job and are like, nah, I'll pass. In fact, I'm going to make you a meme. I'm going to make you a joke, in fact. So, you know, it's not only what you're saying, but how you're saying it. So we have now the Sedition Caucus, right? It is they call excuse me, they call the body of oh my god, and I forgot to bring it up. I think it was the New York Times, either the New York Times or the Washington Post, one of those treacherous papers that posted a like an infographic on their front page. Here's the 127 lawmakers. I think they actually coined it the Sedition Caucus, but they made it. It reminds me of footage I saw of the McCarthy hearings, of just the kangaroo courts, and there's cameras everywhere snapping, blah, 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 and they put someone up on the stand, and he's got a list. He's literally got a list, and there's literally like a blacklist, and it's like, okay, so here's the list of lawmakers, mostly I think all Republican, who followed the legal and constitutionally enabled procedures to challenge the election, the electoral results. Excuse me, like, that's a far different thing than people who orchestrated a riot, who orchestrated an insurrection. I should say, but they are coined the Sedition Caucus, and they are facing mounting calls to resign after voting against Biden's election win, right? And then you got to remember, it comes off of the heels of Cory Bush introducing legislation, right, to expel the same, I think it's the same caucus, the same Sedition Caucus, to expel members or any representatives who challenged the electoral votes, right? But the way that it was framed in the headlines was Cory Bush introduces legislation to expel any lawmakers who supported the riot. And it's like, wait a minute. These things are two vastly different issues, and this is what we're going to see going forward, this amalgamation of the narrative, so that no one can speak about anything that could have or did go wrong in this election. Even though you have people of all people, Senator friggin' McConnell going up after the joint session started up again. He was the first to go speak, and he was talking about how there's fraud and misconduct in every election. And it's like, wait a minute, if you can open with that. And here's the thing. I'm about looking at the errors in the process. I'm not about this Kraken nonsense and, oh my God, there's election. It's like, you know what? The evidence for that was presented and acknowledged was looked at and seen as minimal, because the amount of it that would have had to occur in order for Trump to win was monumental, according to them. So for me, the whole issue is, okay, well then how do we going forward eliminate the opportunity for something like that to happen again? If that's how we're going to play it. Like, something has to be done. You can't simply just say, oh, well, I mean, yeah, sure, it happened, but it's not large enough for... It's like, dude, you have all sorts of issues going on that have happened here. The biggest one that I focus on is the electronic voting, because it's the most obvious one. You can have an electronic audit, of which there were several, all of which pointed to many flaws, some of which we covered here on the show. For me, it's the adjudication log. When a vote needs to be adjudicated, that is, they have some sort of error, clerical error, they're smudged, something like that, it can't be read, it gets sent over to adjudication, where a group of adjudicators then look over at it and determine how it should be voted and what errors there were, and there's no log of it. There's no log. The log is missing. In particular, I'm talking about is Michigan. But I digress. Let's hope I don't get banned, because I'm not sure. I haven't really heard about YouTube being stringent yet, but we'll see. So the Independent reads, the 127 Republican lawmakers who voted to overthrow President-elect Joe Biden's electoral victory are facing fierce backlash from donors, constituents, and even some GOP colleagues following the attempted coup. Wow, Independent. Following the attempted coup at the U.S. Capitol by a pro-Trump mob on Wednesday. Some have even been called to resign. That is shameless. Shameful. Shameless? Shameful? They are shameless. That is shameful. Membership in this so-called Sedition Caucus runs the gamut from congressional backbenchers such as Congressman Mo Brooks, the face of the movement to decertify the election, to House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy of California. It also includes 6 senators, most notably Josh Hawley of Missouri and Ted Cruz of Texas. Many observers and lawmakers have credited Mr. Cruz's and Mr. Hawley's intense, falsehood-riddled rhetoric leading up to the... This is just tinged with bias. Falsehood-riddled rhetoric leading up to the vote, with fueling the anger of the mob that stormed the Capitol. Mr. Cruz has since tried telling local media he disagreed with the president's speech in statements on Wednesday, shortly before the riots descended. But the senator's denunciation of Mr. Trump was so unaligned with the truth of what actually happened, and so, oh my God, all right. Is this an opinion piece or is this news? This is an opinion piece right here. Okay. He has come to terms with the fact that there was a shame for shame, and that's where we live. We live in a society of shaming. But that's, for me, I've really always been on an island unto myself. And as sad as and unfortunate as that is, it has also kind of, steadied me for this moment in time. I don't know. It's a very strange thing for me to see this take place and to kind of stand back in no one's corner, as I've really always have been, because as I'll continue to say, do not follow a person, a politician or political party. Follow your principles and follow, good policy. And with that, it doesn't bother me to stand back and analyze each thing in its own separate nuance and point out these things and point out the errors and point out the consistencies and then walk away. Because the fact is that all of the media is trying to do is get you to click, is get you to buy. And they would love if you would subscribe to their papers, but print is dead. But that's all they're trying to do, is get you to click. That pays, the ads pay for things, the clicks pay for things, and it's really that simple. The age of the manufactured narrative is only going to increase in its intensity. Because what we just read mainly wasn't really news. The what was it, from The Hill? The Hill did much better. But let's see how AP is going to do. Pelosi says House will impeach Trump, pushes VP to oust him. So they basically, from what I understand, oh my God, did they find the bull, the guy with the bull, who they erroneously, because we read the fact checker. Shout out to that fact checker, Lead Stories. They actually got this one in the bag. It was erroneously pointed out by QAnon type Trumpers, apparently, allegedly, that this bullhorn guy, for viewers, it's the guy with the bullhorns and the American flag face paint, that he was Antifa. Even though he was featured on a right-wing website, etc., etc. But I guess they might have charged him. Fine. We'll read about that. We'll read about the possibility and capability of them to find and charge people. Because there's a batch of idiots who didn't wear masks. There's a batch of tactically ready, apparently, people who had masks and zip ties. There were people who stole equipment, espionage equipment, who we don't know anything about, and there are people who had the equipment, but not necessarily the tactical awareness. It's almost as if they drive around going to protests ready for violence, if that makes sense. But AP says Pelosi says House will impeach Trump, pushes VP to oust him. Pelosi gave Pence an ultimatum to either do the 25th or they're going to impeach him. And it's really, he's got what, 12 days left, the 12 days of Christmas, I don't even know. It's not even 12 days, it's 9 days, January 20th, right? House Speaker, 9 days. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said Sunday the House will proceed with legislation to impeach Donald Trump as she pushes the vice president and cabinet to invoke constitutional authority to force him out. The House action can start as soon as Monday as pressure increases on Trump to step aside. A Republican Senator, Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, joined Lisa Murkowski. I keep wanting to say Murkowski of Alaska in calling for Trump to resign and go away. Resign and go away as soon as possible. That's what it's been all about. Just go away. We just want you to go away as soon as possible. Forget your constitutionally enabled and your constitutional privilege, right, to challenge the election as the incumbent president, really, and as a presidential candidate, you have the constitutional privilege and right to challenge the election. Like, if they weren't able to do this legally, they wouldn't have the opportunity to do it. That disconnect always been strange for me, because it's like, how can you say something is treasonous if I'm legally able to do it, right? That's the if that were there's a cognitive disconnect there. But a stunning end to Trump's final days. I know I said this. This is the end and the beginning, right? To Trump's final days, 10 days in office were underway as lawmakers warned of the damage the president could still do before Joe Biden was inaugurated. Trump, holed up at the White House, was increasingly isolated after a mob rioted in the Capitol. We will act with urgency because this president represents an imminent threat, Pelosi said. The horror of the ongoing assault on our democracy perpetrated by this president is intensified, and so is the immediate need for action. On Monday, Pelosi's leadership team will seek a vote on a resolution calling on Vice President Mike Pence and cabinet officials to invoke the 25th, with a full House vote expected on Tuesday. I don't think it worked out. I don't think it worked out. I don't believe it worked out, because I'm thinking it was like, wait, did this happen already? Yes, it happened. Because I remember them calling House speeding to impeach Trump for Capitol insurrection. Okay. So, poised to impeach, the House sped ahead Monday with plans to oust Trump from office, warning he's a threat to democracy, and pushing the vice president, and cabinet to act more quickly. He faces a single charge. Yeah, I remember them saying that the draft for it was just one single piece of paper, the incitement of insurrection. At the same time, FBI warned ominously Monday of potential armed protests. Right. So we'll get to that in a second. The FBI said that there's 50 planned armed rallies at state capitals, and I'm like, well, how do you know? Like, this is what I'm talking about the escalation, the hyperbole. Oh my God. So they literally used like the framework from the previous article. It all added up to stunning final moments, blah, 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 blah. Summoning back Wednesday for votes, yada, 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 pending impeachment. So did they get it? The Democrats' House resolution was blocked by Republicans. However, the full House is to hold a roll call vote on it Tuesday, and it's expected to pass. After that, Pence will have 24 hours. Next would be the impeachment proceedings. It would be historic for them to impeach. If they're able to impeach him before he is out of office, I believe it would be the fastest impeachment in presidential history. And wasn't he? And until like, wait a minute, wouldn't he also be the first president to be impeached twice? He was already impeached once. Oh boy. All right. So we're okay. And so no member of the cabinet has publicly called for Trump to be removed from office through the 25th Amendment. Though the 25th Amendment, damn it, AP. Anyway, so McConnell, good old McConnell, block your $2,000, McConnell, been a pain in the ass, McConnell. More censorship. I just 70,000 QAnon Twitter accounts suspended in the wake of the Capitol riot. I'm not a fan of Q, not to necessarily say support QAnon, but again, this is about the expression of ideas, right? As long as one is not inciting violence or encouraging hate, then you should be fine. So then you come to the conclusion, well, I mean, yeah, talking about the election being stolen or any sort of election fraud or impropriety is inciting hate. Wait, what? Excuse me? Saying that there was a procedural misconduct is inciting hate? Did I mention that for the past 30 years, Democrats have been doing that every time a Republican has won? Did I mention that before I did the podcast, I was just watching Nancy Pelosi in the Gore v. Bush challenging not the election results, but reviewing the election procedures. See, this is what we call a conversation. In a conversation, you break shit down. You feel me? So it's hilarious to me how we are now moving into a day and age where if something is controversial enough, it can be silenced on no merit whatsoever. McConnell circulates procedures for second Senate impeachment trial of Trump. Outgoing Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell on Friday circulated to colleagues a memo outlining the procedure for holding another trial for President Trump if the House impeaches him for a second time in just over a year. The document, which was first reported by the Washington Post, lays out how the Senate would proceed if the House approves articles of impeachment and transmit them to the upper chamber before or by January 19th, when senators are scheduled to resume regular business. McConnell says the most likely scenario, if the House impeaches Trump in his final 12 days, is for the Senate to receive a message from the lower chamber notifying it of the action on January 19th. That would give the Senate the option of ordering the House managers to present those articles on the same day, the 19th. They would impeach him in a day. Senate impeachment rules require that at 1 p.m. on the day after the managers exhibit the articles, the Senate must proceed to their consideration. As a result, the Senate trial would not begin until 1 hour after Joe Biden takes the oath of office. The Senate trial would therefore begin after President Trump's term has expired, either 1 hour after its expiration or 25 hours after its expiration. The document was confirmed. Okay, so they can impeach him after the fact? The document was confirmed by a source familiar with its contents. McConnell's memo notes that the Senate, which is scheduled to hold pro forma sessions until January 19th, the day before Biden is set to take oath, cannot conduct any business during those pro forma meetings without unanimous consent. The GOP leader notes that would preclude the Senate from acting on any articles of impeachment received from the House until Biden is president, raising an implicit question about the point. That's what I meant. But you know what? They would go through it to make that point symbolic. That's what it is. That's what it is. But whatever. All right. So, armed protests being planned at all 50 state capitals, FBI bulletin says. Let me just before I go into it, let's just read. ABC News Grumble says, starting this week and running through at least Inauguration Day, armed protests are being planned at all 50 state capitals and at the U.S. Capitol, according to an internal FBI bulletin. The FBI has also received information in recent days on a group calling for storming state, local, and federal government courthouses and administrative buildings in the event Trump is removed from office prior to Inauguration Day. The group is also planned. What is the group? Shouldn't we know the group so that if we see any of its members or constituents, we can point them out? You should see this Instagram account that I'm following. It is dedicated to locating specific members, specific riders of the Capitol Hill siege, and it's been a tremendous. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there are more than one, but from reading like the comments and like police are commenting on it and working with people, it's been a tremendous assistance. They've taken in over 45,000 digital tips in order to catch individuals. So you would think that they would want us to know what group they were referring to. When they talk about Antifa, BLM, or Proud Boys, they're very specific. I don't understand what this obscurity is about. And if you say something like, oh, well, it's operational security, they don't want to tip off the group. Really? So what? They don't want the group to know that the FBI's like searching for them? Wouldn't that be a great deterrent to stop violence from happening? Oh no, they want to catch them in the act. So they want them to commit violence so they can arrest them? None of these other scenarios are really plausible or good, right? There's no real reason to omit the name of this group. Shit like this always makes me weary and suspicious. Because the first thought of mine is, oh man, well, what's the group? Let's make sure we seek those guys out. We don't want, of course, because you don't want. Well, I don't want violence. People who want violence. But you see what I mean? You want as much information as possible, and nothing about operational security or catching them in the act is a good enough excuse. Sorry, it's not. So the group, it recently said a group calling for storming state and local and federal government courthouses and administration, blah, 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 blah. Government office in every state the day President Biden is inaugurated, regardless of whether states certified electoral votes for Biden or Trump. The FBI received information about an identified armed group intending to try. What the frack? Okay. An identified armed group intending to travel to Washington, D.C. on January 16th. They have warned that if Congress attempts to remove POTUS via the 25th, a huge uprising will occur. Federal law enforcement have advised police agencies to increase their security posture at state houses around the country following the riot. Democratic lawmakers in the House of Representatives pushed forward Monday with an effort to get Pence in the cabinet to invoke the 25th, which would declare Trump incapable. The effort was ultimately blocked by Republican Alex Mooney of West Virginia, and House Democrats then introduced impeachment. The measure, which has more than 200 Democratic co-sponsors, states that he's a threat to national security. According to the FBI, approximately 29 individuals and or social media accounts of individuals who unlawfully entered the Capitol has been identified. Right, the FBI has received nearly 45,000 digital media tips. So it's like, you can't tell me that being able to, codify information together isn't helpful. At least 5 people died. Yes, we know, it's unfortunate. But it's like not letting us know who the group is puts everyone, including, you would hope that they have alerted specifically who the group is to state and local authorities. But the public at large is obviously a great tool, and now everybody's on alert and sketched out and looking for anyone suggesting. This is what I'm saying, and everyone's looking. Oh my God, it reminds me in the post 9/11 world of anyone who talks about the American hegemonic system going around the world, policing the world, bombing countries into oblivion, acting like the policeman of the world in this jackbooted way that it does. And right after 9/11, people were like, "Oh, that's unpatriotic. You're a traitor." Da 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 da. And it's like, wow. And it's like, as I grow older, I will see more of this, like the cycles. Just 20 years ago, the same sort of shaming and discrediting was going on, but in relation to 9/11, and it was the same sort of keywords. You were a patriot if you had this sort of stance, and you were unpatriotic, seditious, and treasonous if you had this stance. I never thought, I don't know why I never thought, especially, being a fan of history as I am, I never thought I would live long enough to see the cycle like that. Just 20 years ago, the same stuff. But the McCarthyism continues. Representative Tim Ryan says, well, actually, this is a little different. We'll get to more McCarthyism later. But 2 officers have been suspended for their involvement in the riot. I don't think there's an involvement, but let's just read this real quick. Donald Trump met with Pence Monday for the first time since last week's violence. That must have been awkward. Can you imagine? That must have been awkward. Since the split opened up between the two, now they're talking about the personal. Okay. So, blah, blah, blah. They reiterated that those who broke the law and stormed the Capitol do not represent the America First movement backed by 75 million Americans and pledged to continue to work on behalf of the country for the remainder of their term. Pence faces criticism from some of Trump supporters and praise from others, defying the president's demand that he somehow, and keyword somehow, because legally, I guess he doesn't have the authority. It doesn't work that way. But somehow reject the results of the election as Congress met last week. Despite Trump's protestations, Pence noted he had no power to reject the votes. Speaking at a rally Wednesday, yada, yada, yada. This has nothing to do... Here we go. They have multiple... For listeners here, they have multiple, it seems like, headlines and subtexts, and only like a partial paragraph of each article on one page. I don't know, USA Today. But Representative Tim Ryan said Monday 2 police officers were suspended related to the riots. When asked if he heard evidence, if he's heard evidence that there was an inside job, Ryan said, "I don't have any direct evidence as yet of any kind of inside job, but 2 members of the Capitol Police were suspended." Hold on, we need to get more on this. We need to get more on this real fast. Okay, here we go. So, let's see. All right, so Capitol Police officers suspended for actions during rioters' attack on Capitol. Several officers have been suspended in the connection with the riot last week that left 5 dead. Earlier, Tim Ryan had said one of the officers took a selfie with the took a selfie with the rioter, and another donned a MAGA hat and started directing people around. Wow, okay. Ryan chairs the House subcommittee that is investigating the police response. He also said that about 10 to other 15 police officers are under investigation. The suspensions come as investigators dig through photos and videos posted online, show much of what went on. Pittman said some of the images show USCP officers and officials appear to be in violation of department regulations and policies. Rioters trashed congressional offices and, in some cases, attacked officers, and in one case, killed a guy with a fire hydrant. It is our intention to prosecute them to the fullest extent. Two Capitol Police officers who were on duty during the melee, two? One from physical injuries, the other by suicide. What? Hold on. That Liebengooden died by suicide. Hold on. I can confirm that Howard Liebengooden died on Saturday by suicide after having been on duty at the Capitol Wednesday. Hold on. Wait a minute. So Howard Liebengooden is a USCP 15-year veteran of the force, and he killed himself? Howard Liebengooden, a 15-year veteran of the U.S. Capitol Police, died Saturday off duty. He killed himself. I can confirm that he died. Okay, right. We were reeling over the death. I'm not sure how this is related to the riot. 51-year-old's death was the second, right? We know Sick Nick died of injuries from the mob. It doesn't say his suicide isn't connected. So here in the article, they just mention, it's unreal. It's unreal. So here in the article about the police chief resigning, or I'm sorry, the first, I think it's the first female police chief. She's the first woman and the first African American, and the first African American woman, right? Because they're all three are separate, right? The first woman, the first African American, and the first African American woman. Hello, guys. Come on, guys. I'm not even going to go there. That's a different video. But in this article, they mentioned that it was separately announced that Howard Liebengooden killed himself, or that he died off duty. So it has nothing to do with the riot and nothing to do with anything. But he's dead, and that's understandable. But here we go with this. So now we are 2 steps removed, right? There's the death in that article. Then there's once removed with the police chief, and that's a riot-related article, and they mention it there. Here we are twice removed. 2 Capitol Police officers who were on duty during the melee died later. One from physical injuries and the other by suicide. I feel like most people aren't going to make that distinction, and they're going to read 2 Capitol Police officers who died during the melee died later. And they're going to keep scanning through. And I don't like the unnecessary mention. The dude killed himself, and there's no reason to suggest that it had anything to do with the riot whatsoever. So why are you mentioning it? Why indeed? But gonna keep going here. I don't know. I feel like I should work in Noam Chomsky, like clips of Noam Chomsky's manufacturing consent. Because it's like this, it's becoming more relevant as time goes on, and it's like 30 years old. But so we were speaking about the several different factions or sections or groups or sects of people that were among the Capitol Hill besiegers, and we had the group that seemed to be more tactically conscious of the situation. They were masks. They had zip ties. You had people with guns and bombs and all the wherewithal and fervor to die, and probably because if you're in a group and you have people that are being killed and the group is still surging forward, then you definitely have those among them with the I don't want to say strength, but I mean it takes strength to die. But you understand what I mean? They have the fervor and the zealotry to go forth despite all the dangers. But then you also had those who, I mean, it seemed like they were just like tailgating, drinking a 40 and cheering on the rally. Yeah. And then a fucking riot jumped off and they were like, you know what? Let's get down. Because again, these people, and I mean, there was a Republican lawmaker amongst them, I think from West Virginia, who was on Instagram Live. There were people, they were doing it. They were live casting on Instagram, there were people, and there, oh my God, I remember one live cast. I was watching videos of it, and there were people on the phone. This lady's on the phone. She's like, "Who should I call?" And it's just they seem slow. They seem remedial, right? You had people who literally pissed and pooped everywhere, right? That group, that sect seemed to make up the majority. And through that screen, you had those with the zip ties and the masks, those with the Molotov cocktails and the semi-automatics, and those who use the opportunity to steal sensitive information. Okay, so of those groups, right? This person, damn it, of this group, don't mind that. Of this group, this person is definitely of the former, not the latter three. You know what I mean? I'm gonna put a bullet in her noggin on live TV. Capitol Rider is arrested for texting friends about plan to shoot and run over Nancy Pelosi. So what were you gonna do? Were you were you going to drag Nancy Pelosi out of Congress and shoot her outside or inside? If you shot her inside, were you going to drag her body out into the street, into an open area to make sure you would be able to run it over? Like, how exactly does that play out? And this is happening. She says this as cops charge Alabama. Okay, never mind. As cops charge Alabama man after finding 11 Molotov cocktails. Everyone's talking about that guy. But then yeah. Okay, so let's just read this. So Cleveland Grover Meredith Jr. Meredith is his last name. Okay, Cleveland Grover Meredith Jr. Has been charged with making threats to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Officials said Meredith texted friends that he wanted to shoot or run over Pelosi. Interesting. But he was so he's actually, that's interesting. How that works? So he was riding, and he texted friends, not Nancy, that he was going to shoot her on live television. I mean, because now I'm thinking, it's like, does that extend to anyone who makes a threat through a text? You know what I mean? Like if I text someone saying, "Hey man, I want to, so and so whatever representative," is that the type of thing because is that type of thing it extends out to? But Meredith is one of 3 people who have been charged with federal crimes. Investigators revealed that in one text, Meredith allegedly wrote that he was thinking of putting a bullet in Pelosi's noggin on live television. He was thinking. Others include Lonnie Kaufman, whose vehicle contained 11 Molotov cocktails. Oh, okay, they are the same person. And Richard Barnett, who was photographed sitting at Pelosi's desk. That's the guy probably with his feet up. All right, let's read about these fools. A Trump supporter who allegedly told his friends that he wanted to shoot and run over Nancy Pelosi has been arrested on federal charges stemming from the riot. I mean, he was there, right? I hope. Right? Yeah, he was there. Okay. According to CNN, Cleve traveled to D.C. last Tuesday with hundreds of rounds of ammunition and an assault rifle. Okay. That that changes things drastically. We are actually, though, we have run out of time, and me and all my rambling. I will have to, and there's going to be just an onslaught of news, but I will have to finish up tomorrow, because we still need to go over Twitter and Facebook. Their censorious behavior only increases. Facebook is purging all content mentioning "stop this." I hate that. "Stop the steal." There's always got to be a catchphrase. I'm wondering what is like blinking behind me, like blinking red. It doesn't matter. Twitter has outright banned Trump, as we know. But furthermore, Parler has been removed first from Apple and then from Amazon. And so Parler sues. And so we're seeing the encroaching Orwellian present that will be the public forum, the public speaking sphere, the things that we speak about, and how we're able to speak about them is under attack. Well, it's never really stopped being under attack. But I digress. Please like, share, and subscribe. Of course, only if you like what I'm doing. And be well to yourself and to each other.